In the brutal opening weeks of Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, chaos reigned. Soviet armies were shattered, entire divisions encircled and destroyed. In that maelstrom of fire and panic, individual stories were swallowed whole, stories of soldiers who vanished, their fates unknown, becoming mere entries on long lists of the missing. But in late July 1941, one such missing person report landed on a desk in the Kremlin that was different from all others. It concerned a 34-year-old senior lieutenant of artillery, a man who had been serving with the 14th Howitzer Regiment. His name was Yakov Dzhugashvili. To his comrades, he was just Lieutenant Dzhugashvili. To the world, and more importantly, to the German intelligence officers now interrogating him in a prisoner of war camp, he was the eldest son of Joseph Stalin. His capture was not just a military incident. It was a seismic political event. Adolf Hitler now held, in the flesh, the son of his archenemy. It seemed like the ultimate prize, a trump card that could be played for immense strategic or propaganda gain. What followed was not a story of a grand exchange or a father's desperate bid to save his child. Instead, it became one of the war's most profound and chilling studies in power, ideology, and sacrifice. It reveals the absolute, terrifying logic of total war under a dictator like Stalin, a logic where even blood ties were subservient to the cold calculus of the state. This is the story of Yakov Dzhugashvili, the hostage Hitler could not break, and the father who chose his revolution over his son. Yakov's life was, from the beginning, shadowed by his father's rising, and then absolute power. His relationship with Stalin was famously difficult, marked by resentment and disappointment. Stalin disapproved of Yakov's first marriage, and when Yakov attempted suicide in the 1920s after a bitter argument, Stalin's cold remark was reportedly, "He can't even shoot straight." Yakov eventually found a path, training as an engineer and later joining the Red Army. When war broke out, he didn't seek a safe staff position. He requested frontline command. He was with his unit near Vitebsk when the German blitzkrieg overwhelmed them. In the desperate, confused fighting of July 16th, his unit was decimated. Official Soviet history would later claim he was treacherously captured, hinting at desertion, a narrative Stalin may have encouraged to distance himself from the shame of a son taken alive. But evidence suggests Yakov fought until ammunition was exhausted and was simply overwhelmed. The Germans, upon realizing the incredible identity of their prisoner, transferred him immediately to a special compound at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp north of Berlin. He was no longer just a POW. He was packaged Stalin. For Hitler and Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry, Yakov was a goldmine. They flooded the front lines with leaflets featuring a photograph of a despondent-looking Yakov with German officers, alongside text aimed at demoralizing Soviet troops. Follow the example of Stalin's son. He is alive, healthy, and feeling great. If even the son of your supreme commander has surrendered, what are you dying for? The psychological blow was intended to be crushing, but the Nazis had bigger plans than just leaflets. They wanted a high-stakes trade. In the winter of 1942-43, following the catastrophic German defeat at Stalingrad, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus and over 90,000 of his men surrendered to the Soviets. Paulus was the highest-ranking German officer ever captured. For the Nazi leadership, securing his return became an obsession, a way to salvage some prestige. The perfect bargaining chip was already in their custody. Yakov. Secret diplomatic feelers were extended through neutral countries. The proposed deal was straightforward. Stalin's son for Field Marshal Paulus. The stage was set for one of history's most dramatic potential prisoner swaps. But Stalin's response was not that of a father. It was that of the Vozd, the leader. He had already issued the infamous Order No. 270, which declared all Soviet soldiers who surrendered as traitors to the motherland, and their families were to be arrested. To make an exception for his own son would shatter that edict and reveal a fatal weakness. According to accounts from those in his inner circle, Stalin's reaction was brutal and unequivocal. He reportedly said, "I have no son named Yakov," and refused to entertain any exchange. There is a famous, though possibly apocryphal story, that when the Germans formally proposed trading Yakov for Paulus, Stalin retorted, "I will not trade a marshal for a lieutenant." Whether he said those exact words is debated, but the sentiment was absolutely true to his character. In Stalin's worldview, the millions of sons already lost to the war could not be betrayed for the sake of one, even his own. To do so would undermine the very foundation of sacrificial suffering upon which the Soviet war effort was built. The refusal was a monstrous act of political principle, a demonstration that for Stalin, the state and the war came before everything, a lesson meant for both Hitler and his own people. Meanwhile, Yakov's existence in captivity was a special kind of hell. Isolated in a special barracks at Sachsenhausen with other high-value prisoners, including British officers, he was under constant pressure and surveillance. German interrogators probed for weaknesses, for any hint of disloyalty to his father they could exploit. But by most accounts, Yakov conducted himself with stoic dignity, refusing to cooperate with propaganda efforts beyond the initial forced photographs. He was deeply ashamed of his capture, a feeling compounded by his father's very public disavowal. He learned of Stalin's no prisoners decree and the refusal to trade him. The psychological weight was immense. He was a man caught between two ruthless systems, rejected by one and used as a pawn by the other. His final months are shrouded in some mystery, but the prevailing account of his death is both tragic and symbolic. On the evening of April 14, 1943, after a heated argument with his British barrackmates, some reports suggest over the squalid conditions or accusations of favoritism, Yakov, in a state of extreme agitation, refused to return to the barracks. He walked towards the perimeter fence. Guards shouted for him to halt. He kept walking, and according to the official German report, he then deliberately hurled himself onto the electrified barbed wire. The guard shot him in the head. He was 36 years old. Whether it was a calculated suicide, a desperate escape attempt, or an act of protest meant to force the guard's hand, the result was the same. The pawn had been removed from the board. The news of Yakov's death was kept secret by the Germans for some time, and was not confirmed to Stalin until after the war. The aftermath of Yakov's story is a study in contrasts. In the West, his fate became a poignant human interest story, a symbol of the personal tragedies behind the grand political narratives of the war. In the Soviet Union, his existence was largely erased. Stalin never spoke publicly of him. For decades, Yakov was an unperson, his capture an embarrassing footnote. It was only during the Khrushchev thaw, and later under Gorbachev's glasnost, that his story was revisited, and he was posthumously awarded the Order of the Patriotic War, a bittersweet rehabilitation. The story of Stalin's son is more than a family drama. It is a window into the absolute nature of totalitarian power. Hitler saw Yakov as leverage, a commodity to be traded. Stalin saw him as a liability, a test of his own implacable will. In the end, Yakov Dzhugashvili was neither. He was a man, a soldier, who found himself at the cruel intersection of history's most destructive forces. His life and death stand as a stark reminder that in the vast, grinding machinery of war and ideology, individual lives, no matter whose son they are, can be crushed by the very principles they are meant to uphold. He was the ultimate sacrifice to his father's cold creed, a testament to the fact that in Stalin's Russia, not even the dictator's family was safe from the demands of the revolution.